In these perilous times, see from current events how biblical prophecy is coming to pass in front of our eyes. You're watching In the Last Days, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. With Martin and Natalie Blackham. Thank you to our friends and partners who make this program possible. Now, here's Martin and Natalie.
Hi, welcome to the In the Last Days television program with myself, Martin Blackham. Great to have you with us. Natalie's behind the scenes today, but she says hello. You know, one of the things that we've looked at on the In the Last Days television program, and something we've really done since we started the program, is looking at the bias in the media against Israel. And we have a very special guest in the studio today, who we're going to be talking about that. And it's Dr. Richard Lanz. Thank you so much for coming in today, Richard. Great to have you with us. Richard is an author and a speaker. He's a professor of history at Boston University. And Richard is the person who coined the word Pallywood, which is the description of the made-up news stories that we're seeing in Israel, which I guess fake is probably not, perhaps, is fake? Staged, that's a better way of putting it, staged, that they're put on for the journalists and the Western media. And he's been a writer for the UK's Daily Telegraph, and many of you may be very familiar with the Daily Telegraph newspaper. He's written for them, and as well as the Allgemeine news website and the New English Review. And also Richard's done a lot of research into the rise of global Islam. So we're going to start maybe at the beginning with the rise of global Islam. Maybe you can speak a bit about that, because you've done some studies into that. And,
okay. So first I should mention that I'm not an Islam scholar. My specialty, in fact, I was trained as a medievalist, and my specialty is millennial movements, messianic movements, appropriate in the last days. So I wrote a book called Heaven on Earth, The Varieties of the Millennial Experience, and I have 10 case studies in the book, the last of which is about global jihad as an apocalyptic millennial movement. By that I mean a movement that has a millennial goal, which is the perfection of the world, which in Muslim terms would be turning the entire world into Dar al-Islam. So that's the millennial goal. And then the apocalyptic, I use that term to mean the sense of the imminence of this transformation from this world where evil still dominates. For Muslims, you know, the domination of gender equality, Western progressive values, et cetera, godlessness, atheism, and so on. The transformation from that world where evil dominates to the world where good is victorious. So global jihadis represent the most, shall we say, dangerous is too mild a word, version of apocalyptic thought, which is that not only is the end time, this transition, marked by enormous destruction, which is also true, for example, of the rapture scenarios in Christian thought, but that is passive in the sense that God does the destruction. Here we have people who believe that they are God's agents, tools and weapons of that destruction. And in history, those have probably been the most destructive megadeth movements we know. There was one in China in the middle of the 19th century, around the time of the American Civil War, 1850s and 60s. 14 years of millennial war, and somewhere between 20 and 35 million dead.
Do you think that with the rise of ISIS and it's becoming more seen in the public media, in newspapers and television?
Yes, because this particular wave of global jihad, which is, I think, in the history of Islam, with the exception of the sort of early century, the beginning century, is the most extensive global ambition that we've seen on the part of Muslims. Starts in 1979, which for them is the year 1400 in the calendar that they use. And that's when Khomeini took over in Iran, and that's the beginnings of a variety of other movements. Hezbollah is 82, Hamas is 88, Al-Qaeda is in there, responding to the Russian invasion of Afghanistan and so on. At the time, most people didn't really understand what was going on. 2000, it really metastasizes, and we can get into the role of the media in that metastasis. But even then, there was enormous reluctance on the part of Westerners to acknowledge the existence of this apocalyptic movement, to recognize its apocalyptic nature. We saw recently with the amazing comment by President Obama, where he said, you know, ISIS is not Muslim because it's not Islam, because no religion calls for the killing of innocent civilians. Now, first of all, we have to understand that as far as the jihadis are concerned, we're all not innocent. All of us infidels are not innocent, and Muslims who are not sufficiently strict in their observance are also not innocent. So the idea that, you know, our definition of innocent should inform their activity is crazy. And, you know, so in that sense, there's been a long, way too long period of denial in the West. We don't, I mean, look, we don't want to believe we're at war, and certainly we don't want to believe we're at war with a variant of a religion that has 1.x million members. And I'm not saying that all Muslims are part of global jihad, but global jihad recruits from not just 1.6, but ISIS shows us they recruit from converts as well. So they have a large pool from which to recruit. So there's been extensive denial, and I think ISIS finally has sort of broken through the consciousness of Westerners that, you know, something very strange is happening. I tried to have a conference back in the aughts, in the early 2000s, on the apocalyptic dimensions. There was enormous resistance to it. I'm going to do it again. This time, you know, people like Timothy Furnish and David Cook, who have written extensively on this, are finally being interviewed by the media extensively, and they're willing to participate. But this is really something that it's very hard to, there's huge resistance to acknowledging this issue.
Is that resistance from people who are saying that it's because Islam is being singled out, or is it resistance because of political correctness, or?
Well, the excuse they use is we shouldn't be Islamophobic. Personally, I think the best definition of Islamophobia is the fear of criticizing Islam. But the idea that we shouldn't be criticizing Islam, it seems to me, is crazy, and that we shouldn't single it out is also crazy. I mean, there's no religion on the planet with a history of violence like the history of Islam. There's no religion on the planet with, certainly currently, engaged in so much terrorism and violence. There's this instinctive response in the West to say, well, we too. Israelis do it, the Westerners do it, you know. We too, we have our crazy Christians and Jews who are extremists and apocalyptic and so on and so forth. There's just no comparison about the strength and power of global jihad and its grip on the public sphere in the Muslim world in comparison with the really marginal violent groups in both Judaism and Christianity. So the idea that we shouldn't single out Islam, I think, is deeply mistaken. But all of these are, let's call them defense mechanisms. The real question is why? Why are we so susceptible to this? And I think that there are a variety of reasons, but I think that really deep down, we don't want to believe that we're at war. People have declared war against us, and we're saying, no, they don't mean it. There was a very funny piece that went out recently of a jihadi, you know, wrapped up, and he's holding a sign, you know, basically proclaiming jihadi intentions. And then there's a picture of another, a woman holding a sign saying, I'm a liberal, and he doesn't really mean what he says. You know, and in a sense, that's what Obama is saying. They don't really mean what they say. No, they do mean what they say, and it's hard for us. you know, when Sam Huntington's book came out in the early 90s, there was a huge abreaction. Nobody wanted, you know, he was a warmonger. He's creating the clash of civilizations rather than identifying it and so on. And I remember at one point I was teaching the book and I didn't have my copy. I asked a colleague if I could borrow it. And she said, I would never have that book on my shelves. You know, this is an intellectual. I wouldn't have a book I disagree with on my shelves. But it really is sort of this politically correct blanket refusal, and anybody who does acknowledge it is immediately labeled right-wing, warmongering, etc., Islamophobic, and so on. And I think it's done terrible damage to both our intellectual community and our intelligence community.
And the strange thing is, Islam, I mean, we've seen with the recent beheadings, unfortunately, of the people who were captured by ISIS. We saw the beheadings, and unfortunately, they're saying the people who are saying this is wrong or extreme, whilst they're the ones who, gosh, you know, beheading people on the camera is something unbelievable, and yet with this extreme, and then they're saying that anybody who speaks against them, they're the ones who are as extreme.
Right. And that's the sort of topsy-turvy world, as Melanie Phillips would say, the world turned upside down, that we're in which we're in such denial that, you know, to make an analogy to a disease, the body, you know, if the body is invaded, the messages go to the brain, and those messages trigger white blood cells that intercept these foreign bodies. Autoimmune deficiency is when the body doesn't respond. In this case, what's happening is that there are invading forces. The people who warn, in other words, the messages going to the brain saying there are invading forces, are the ones that get attacked. And the invading forces are given sort of an open field in which to operate. So, for example, in 2001, right after 9/11, George Bush stood up with Muslims on either side and declared that Islam was a religion of peace. Now, for diplomatic reasons, whatever, he felt he had to say that. I don't think he should have, but that was the way he decided to go. But right next to him is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He didn't even know that, because so much of the investigation by the FBI into the Muslim Brotherhood had been shut down and blocked, that, you know, at the highest levels of American intelligence, we don't know what's going on. I mean, again, with the Muslim Brotherhood during the Arab Spring, you know, we have the head of national intelligence saying that it's a largely secular, Muslim Brotherhood is a largely secular movement. We have the Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton, saying it's moderate. You know, if you define as moderate anybody who doesn't actually use violence, you know, what does moderate mean? It's a meaningless term.
And there was also Benghazi, where there was the attack.
And so we blame the movie maker, right? When it had nothing to do with the movie maker. And the idea, again, you know, this is an interesting point. The Pope criticized Islam at one point. He read this text it wasn't publicly, he didn't do it on TV or stuff, but he read a text from a 14th century Byzantine emperor who said that Islam is inherently violent. Muslims rioted all over the world. A nun got shot in the back. Dozens of people were killed. And they're getting violent because we called them violent. And instead of the joke being on them, the pressure is on the Pope not to provoke them. So in a sense, what we do is we treat Islam as a kind of force of nature, you know, and just as you wouldn't sort of scold your cat for killing a bird, we won't scold Islam. You know, the pressure should have been on Islam and the moderates to oppose this, rather than the pressure on the Pope to apologize for provoking them, as if provoking them, as if they have no choice, as if they have to be provoked, they have to be violent. Therefore, we can't say they're violent. It's a crazy world.
One of the interesting things, Richard, is that in the United Kingdom, and many of our viewers may know the film and the story of Winston Churchill, who was saying there's a problem with the Nazis, long before the outbreak
Right.
of World War II, a lot of the people in the UK at that time were saying to him, well, you know, Germany was devastated in World War
Right,
One.
you
We
have to
have to let them.
understand.
We have to let them rebuild, and the Nazis are rebuilding the roads
Right.
and the, and he was saying, no, this is a movement of destruction, and yet he was like a lone voice. Winston Churchill was a lone voice in the wilderness.
Right.
But do you think there's a waking up to what's happening now?
Well, look, I mean, I actually think that we're so slow at waking up that even if something like the Nazi invasion of Poland were to happen, it would be difficult for us to wake up. I mean, you know, once the Nazis invaded Poland, actually people went to war. I think we're so reluctant to go to war. We're so, I mean, we have a president who says, I'm going to fight ISIS, but no boots on the ground. I mean, even if you don't plan to put boots on the ground, you don't say it. So I think that, look, there's an excellent text out. It's a thesis that was written for the Joint Military Intelligence College in Washington by a fellow named Stuart Green called Cognitive Warfare. I discuss it a lot at my website, The Augean Stables. So Stuart Green points out that you have these memes that essentially paralyze us. And many of the memes, from my point of view, are messianic. They're things like war is not the answer, violence never solved anything. You know, if war is not the answer, then what's the answer to the Nazis? So the idea that you would accept these, and they're all very nice sounding, and we all wish they were true, but if you operate as if they're true, when in fact you're surrounded by people who are at war with you, it's a little like going out in a blizzard in a bikini. I mean, you're just asking to get blasted.
And one of the strange things we've noticed, and we've talked about this on the program before, is the left wing and the peace people who seem to have this constant thing that, oh, we must not do anything, and we're always going to have to give land, or we're going to have to appease
Make
people.
concessions and appease, yes.
And it seems to be a very strange or unholy alliance between the left and Islam, which is so, you know, you wonder how on earth these people who seem so totally poles apart.
Right. Okay, so I think there are two dimensions to this problem. On the one hand, let's call them the soft left, liberals, sort of pacifist progressives. And on the other hand, there's the hard left, which is sort of the revolutionaries. Now, the revolutionaries have clearly, and we have texts from them, acknowledging that they have decided to make an alliance with jihad. And they view it as this anti-imperialist alliance, which has to be one of the great follies. I mean, if peace in our time is one of the great follies of the 30s, then the idea that Hamas and Hezbollah are anti-imperialist is one of the great follies of the 21st century. And part of it is that they're anti-American imperialism. So you have a left that is, for the left, particularly since the fall of the Soviet Union, but even before, American hegemony the world over is viewed as the great evil of our time. Now, the Muslims also believe, the jihadis also believe that. So you have this alliance, and of course, you know, having lost the proletariat and having sort of not having sort of troops for battle, the idea that we could sort of, the hard left, the revolutionary left, could sort of use the martial energies of the jihadis is very attractive. And you see it, for example, in those huge demonstrations against America in 2003, you know, the sort of anti-war or peace rallies that were literally millions of people. And in London, for example, millions of people demonstrated, amongst them jihadis, right? They're at an anti-war rally, and it's not anti-war, it's anti-American war. So on the one hand, you have that. On the other hand, you have the soft ones who are enamored with things like war is not the answer, or these kinds of memes, we're all the same. If we're nice to them, they'll be nice to us, etc. And they actually run a kind of interference. I mean, what should have happened in 2000, I call it the aughts, the first decade of the 21st century. What should have happened in the 21st century when the hard left allied itself with the jihadis is that the soft left should have disowned them. And instead, it adopted this politically correct language of, oh no, we can't talk about the jihadis, we can't, Islam is a religion of peace, et cetera, et cetera. So you have this sort of combo of nice cop, tough cop on the left making an alliance with what has to be the most ruthless and ambitious imperialist movement alive today.
And one of the things that's always surprised me and is that there's been such poor coverage of this whole problem. Now, I've brought in into the studio today, and let me see if I can find that. This isn't recent, but this is the Daily Mail, which says, if we can get on the camera, it says, "Welcome home," and you've got at the top jihadis saying the soldiers are butchers of Basra, and then underneath it's got the soldiers coming back, the British soldiers from, I'm not sure if that's from Iraq, yeah. On that, this is very good, but the coverage has been so in the
So the Daily Mail
newspapers.
is willing to cover it. That kind of coverage would never show up in the Guardian. It would be considered Islamophobic by any bien-pensant member of the Western intelligentsia. I actually compare this to what physicians called congenital analgesia, which is a disease in which the nerves do not report pain to the brain. So you can literally burn your hand off and not know it because you're not getting messages of pain from the nerves. And in this sense, the nerves that should be reporting the pain are the media, and they're constantly underreporting these kinds of aggressions. So for instance, the Rotherham affair with the systematic rape of, infidel white girls that went on for over a decade. People knew about it, they were afraid to report it, they didn't report it. During the riots in France in 2005, people were running around yelling Allahu Akbar and burning cars, torching buildings, etc. The media refused to report it, and one head of a major station actually said, "I will not show these pictures of these guys doing the bombings because I don't want to support right-wing candidates." So telling people news that might actually get them to support the Churchills is considered off base.
And do you think, if people are watching today, is there somewhere they can access what's really going on? The problem is the media is...
Right.
The media is so... either it's controlled, or there's just intimidation, or political correctness, and there's a difficulty for people to access news that they can trust.
All right, so one of the things is there's a whole blogosphere out there. For those who want really good coverage of, say, the Arab-Israeli conflict, there's a blog called Elder of Zion, which is a joke, but okay. There's a blog called Elder of Zion. He is tireless, and he does really excellent work. And he caught a lot of Pallywood incidents and so on this time and in previous times and so on. There are other good blogs. Israel Matzav, Israeli Cool did some really great work on the statistics of casualties during this war and so on. But the best way to do it is if you read an article and it's talking about West Asians, or it's talking about, the article in the New York Times that covered the Rotherham thing never mentioned Islam. It did mention that they were Pakistani, which is pretty good giveaway, but it wouldn't say, and it certainly wouldn't cover the fact that there is actually a rape jihad, that this is one of the ways that jihadis feel they can intimidate and subordinate and subject infidels to the status that they deserve, which is dhimmi, the subject status. So what you do is if you read an article and you suspect that something's going on here and that you're not being told the full story, then just put that title into Google or whatever your search engine is and search, and you'll find blogs that are critiquing it. And that's the best way to get it. There's a whole blogosphere which critiques the mainstream news media. And the way to get at it is whatever article you're reading in the mainstream news media, check out what the critiques are. And sometimes it's devastating what goes on.
And if you're watching today and maybe you don't have access to the internet, don't forget you can go to a library. And I know in the United Kingdom there's a very good internet service, and your librarian will help you to do research and to look into all these stories. And these are the days when we must not just accept what the media says, but actually do the research. Great to have you with us.
So just one last thing. In England, I mean, look up what Douglas Murray has to say. Look up what Sam Westrop has to say. These are people who are onto the affair, who are not intimidated. They're not Islamophobic.
It's been great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to email us, don't forget you can email at info@inthelastdays.com. And remember, we're living in the last days.
You've been watching In the Last Days, a TV program with Martin and Natalie Blackham, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. If you would like to financially support the program or find out about conferences, meetings, or ministry products, then please contact us with the details on your screen. Visit our easy-to-use website at www.inthelastdays.com and register for our free e-newsletter. Get the latest news from Israel, product information, online video teaching, or watch today's TV program at a time that's convenient to you. Thank you again, friends and partners, for making this program possible.
See you same time, same station for the next program from In the Last Days.